In this video, I'm going to show you the exact launch sequence that I've used to generate millions of dollars. In fact, I used this sequence to run multiple seven-figure launches for my online course business. But this sequence doesn't just work for courses. I adapted this sequence for my SaaS startup, and launches are now responsible for about 30% of our MRR. And in this video, I'm going to lay everything out, the exact sequence, templates, examples, and more. So when I first started doing launches, I made them way too complicated. I had this idea in my head that the more complicated the launch was, the more successful it would be. Only years later did I realize it's pretty much the opposite, where if you have a simple launch, it's very effective and tactical, it works better than a bunch of bells and whistles. So when I first started doing launches, I would have like 12 emails, webinars, segmentation, and all this stuff. And I eventually got tired of it, and I realized my launches were performing worse the more stuff I added. So as an experiment, I decided to strip down the whole launch sequence to just the basics and see how that did. And that launch was actually my first seven-figure launch. And after years of testing, I developed a simple launch sequence that works great. And like I mentioned earlier, you can use this launch sequence to launch any product. I've used this sequence to launch courses, SaaS products, and have even seen modifications of this launch used for physical products. So without further ado, here is the exact launch sequence. Now don't worry, I'm gonna break all this down for you, including templates and examples. But I think it's helpful to sort of see an overview first before we get into the nitty-gritty details. As you can see, this launch is made up of four main messages: the pre-launch, the big reveal, the case study, and the last chance. So let's break each of these down. The first message in the sequence is actually maybe the most important of all of them, which is the pre-launch. This is a message that you send before you even launch your product. Why is this important? Well, think about it. Why do companies like Apple preview the iPhone months before it launches? And why do companies like Marvel release teaser trailers months or sometimes even years before the movie comes out? It's because that helps build anticipation for your product before you actually launch it. Now, I know you're not gonna launch the next iPhone or a $200 million Marvel movie, but the same rule applies for anything that you're launching. It's important to preview it before you launch it. You don't just wanna say, out of the blue, I have a product, come buy it. It's really important to have this pre-launch first. Plus, having this pre-launch sequence helps make it so your product launch doesn't just appear out of the blue. It helps show that, look, this is something we planned, this is something that's coming out, and it shows that you have confidence in what you're selling. For example, with my old company, my old course business, we would have multiple pre-launch emails before the launch went live. So your pre-launch message doesn't need to be anything fancy. It can just be, you have something coming out, and here's why you built it, and here's why it's important. The idea isn't really to sell here, right? Because someone can't even buy what you're selling. You haven't launched it yet. It's just to build anticipation for what's coming next. Here's an example of a pre-launch email from my old course business, Backlinko. As you can see, the message isn't really hard selling anything. It's just giving a little bit of backstory about why I created this product. And at Exploding Topics, before we launch anything like a new version of the software or some special promotion, we always include a pre-launch in the newsletter before we actually do the launch. And that's really all there is to it when it comes to your pre-launch. The next message in the sequence is the big reveal. Here's where you reveal what your product is, why it's important, and why people should care. So for example, here's a launch email from Backlinko. Let's break down why this message is so important and why it converted so well for us. Well, first of all, as you can see, we don't beat around the bush or go into some long backstory about why we're launching the product or how we created it. That's some stuff you can cover in the pre-launch. When I first started doing launches, I used to make this email way too long and complicated. I go into this huge backstory about my problem and how you can relate to the problem. And then at the end, I would sort of say, and now I have a product. Instead, you want to front load that you're launching something. That's what this message is all about. All that backstory is for the pre-launch, and you've already done that. So there's no need to do it again here. Instead, your big reveal should be exactly that. It should be the product is live. You can now get it. Now, it doesn't mean you just want to send a link to your product and say, buy my thing, and that should be the entire message. You do want to include more content, but it's important to front load the fact that your product is now live and available for sale. Again, simple works when it comes to launches. The more complicated you try to make things, the more you overthink things, the less it generally tends to convert. So after you reveal that your product is live, you want to give a little bit of context about why the person should care. What is the product? What does it do? It doesn't need to be like a lot of information because that's what your sales page is for. But you do want to give people some context around what you're actually selling and what problem it solves. As you can see here in this launch email, we talk about why Exploding Topics Pro is a great product already and how we made it even better. And that's the point of the launch. We also list out a few bullets of what's included in the product, specifically what's included in this new version. Now, again, you don't want to go into too much detail here because you should have a dedicated sales page that goes way more into depth into what you're actually offering. But again, the launch email can't just be like, I'm selling something, go buy it. You do need to provide people with some information to know what you're selling. So that way they can be intrigued and click on the link and learn more. But you do want to include some information about what you're actually selling. That way people that didn't read your pre-launch email or forgot about your pre-launch email, they actually know what's included at a high level. And again, the details can be saved for your sales page. You don't need to include all that stuff in the email. Just a couple of bullets is more than enough. And then finally, you want a call to action to really push people to check out what you're selling. Now, at this point, I don't recommend doing any hard sells or twisting their arm or any sort of limited time stuff. The real point here is to introduce your product, hopefully get them to the sales page and buy, but at least get the person to the sales page so they can consider your product later on. Because later on, you're gonna have some limited time thing that's gonna push someone to take action. But at this point, there's really no point to hard sell. So I just include a call to action that basically encourages people to either visit the page or try the product. In fact, with my online course business, in the first couple messages, including this big reveal, the call to actions were things like learn more instead of buy now, because we weren't really pushing people to buy. The goal at this point was to help them get exposed to the product and get educated about the product and see if it's a good fit for them. So at least they're considering it when we later on start to twist the knife a little bit with the limited time bonuses or limited time offer. So the next message in the sequence is the case study. And here's where you show results that someone got from your product, or results that you've even got from your product. It doesn't have to be someone else. For example, with my online course business, the case study was usually a student that took the course and the results that they got. Again, not rocket science, but it was compelling for people to see that case study right after seeing the product. You sort of set up why you developed the product, you've launched it, and at this point you're showing social proof to show that it actually works. That 1, 2, 3 sequence is really powerful, and that's why it's important to launch with a sequence, because all these different messages build on one another and they push people further down the funnel and get them closer to buying. So for example, with my online course business, we'd have the pre-launch where I'd go into the problem of not getting enough traffic, and then go into the course itself. Here's what it is, here's what's included, here's what you get. And then third, and maybe even most important, was the social proof. It's not just a product, it's a product that works, and here's proof. And if you don't have a case study yet, that's totally fine. You can use yourself as a case study, because I'm assuming that you use your product and got results from it, or you use your system and got results. So for example, let's say you're selling a course on being more flexible. Maybe you don't have any students yet, but hopefully you use this system to get more flexible yourself. That's totally fine for the case study. Or in the case of Exploding Topics, when we first launched, we didn't have any customers yet. So our case study was the fact that we found all these trends early, and we showed specific trends that we found before they took off. And that's really all there is to the case study email. All it really should contain is a little bit of before, a little bit of after, and then a brief call to action at the end. The final message is the last chance. And this is where you basically say the deal is closing, whether it's the course itself, you can't buy it anymore, whether you're limited time in terms of selling the product, whether there's a limited quantity. Basically, here's where you get into that sort of scarcity, where you say there's something that's going to end at a certain time, so now it's time to take action. What that is depends completely on your product. So let me show you a couple real life examples. With Backlinko, I would only open my course enrollment for like 3 or 4 days at a time. And that was a deadline. Buy now or I'm closing enrollment, which is very powerful if people are interested in your product, because a lot of times with an online course, people are like, I'm busy, I'm going to go on vacation next week, I don't really have time to buy right now, I'll buy it in 3 months, and then they won't. But having this sort of open and closed enrollment, it pushes people off the fence and gets them to buy. With Exploding Topics, which is a SaaS company, it doesn't make as much sense to do this open and closed sort of time period, right? We want people to be able to buy all the time. So what we do is we use some sort of limited time offer. For example, we're about to double our pricing. And before we did, we sent out a message that said, we're about to double our pricing. So if you get in by this date, you can be grandfathered in with the old pricing forever, which ended up working really well. So no matter what you're launching, it is important to have some limited time element to it, whether it's an introductory price, whether they can buy it in general, or even a limited time bonus that's tied to them taking action before a certain date. And again, this message should be really simple. Whatever offer is ending at such and such a time, this is your last chance to take action. This is the last message you're gonna receive about this launch. That way people aren't gonna unsubscribe and spam during the launch, because a lot of times, a lot of gurus will send out like 1,000 messages in a week and it is annoying. So it helps separate you from them by saying, look, here's the offer, you can take it or leave it. If it's not for you, no problem. We're gonna go back to our regularly scheduled program with the next message. And that's really all you need to do in that message. Just say, here's a deadline, here's a link. If you wanna sign up, great. If not, no problem. No hard sell. Back in the day, I used to really hard sell in this message and really try to push people off the fence and be like, this is your last chance, you gotta get it now. And I've realized that the deadline itself does all the heavy lifting for you. You don't need to be pushy. You just need to say, here's a deadline, here's an offer, take it or leave it. Yeah, so that's really it. If you follow this launch sequence, I can almost guarantee that you're gonna get better results from your launches than if you do some complicated segmentation, webinar, reverse funnel nonsense. The real key to launches, as I've learned, is the sequence. It's all about the sequence. If you nail the sequence of pre-launch, getting people interested in your product, launching the product, getting them to see it and consider it, the case study, getting them to see that it works, and then finally following up with some sort of deadline, that sequence is extremely powerful and effective. So yeah, now I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever launched a product before? Have you ever used a sequence like this? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video.